Every reserve in this system conducts a periodic analysis of the trainings that are already being offered and an assessment of audience needs to identify the area's priorities. And that includes things like water quality, habitat, and climate, and how to deliver training on them. So this program stays nimble and is really focused on addressing the needs of the partners and assessing those on a regular basis. So our K through 12 education program helps educators bring estuarine science into their classrooms through hands-on learning, experiments, field work, and data explorations. The goal of the KEEP program is to increase estuary literacy among students, teachers, and public. Reserves also offer teacher development programs that use established coastal and estuarine science curricula aligned with state and national science education standards. Teachers on the estuary workshops give teachers the opportunity to explore coastal habitats and conduct field investigations, learn how to integrate local and national monitoring data into the classroom, and gain hands-on experience. And then finally, talk a little bit about the Reserve Science Collaborative. So the LaNERR Science Collaborative funds user-driven collaborative research and science transfer activities that address critical coastal management needs through a competitive process annually. The collaborative is currently administered through the University of Michigan through a cooperative agreement they have with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. The collaborative offers grants for several different types of research activities. So the first are collaborative research projects that conduct new applied science through end-user-driven collaborative processes that result in research, data, tools, or other products that will inform decision-making related to a reserve management need. The second type of project that this program funds are science transfer projects that promote the use of science. So these projects leverage existing research and identify new opportunities to apply it for the benefit of coastal communities and ecosystems. And then finally, they fund catalyst grants, which support activities that advance collaborative science by facilitating the development of new collaborative science ideas, amplifying or enhancing existing collaborative research, or synthesizing NERR's monitoring data for a regional or national application. And so I want to emphasize that regardless of what the project type is, all of these funded projects must be collaborative in nature, meaning that the end users of the research, so local decision makers and managers, are active participants in the research process. The critical coastal management needs that this research program is intended to address include climate change, water quality, habitat restoration, ecosystem services valuation, and monitoring and data synthesis. On average, for this program, between $3 to $5 million is allocated annually. Okay, so speaking of funding and allocations, I'm going to talk a little bit about our appropriations. And so what you're seeing here on the slide are the congressional appropriations for the reserve system over the past 3 fiscal years. So these funds go through 2 primary opportunities. The first is our Operations, Research, and Facilities Awards. And this is essentially the base funding for a designated reserve. There's a 70-30 federal, non-federal match, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. And this is distributed across all reserve sites non-competitively. In FY20, this equated to a little over $728,000 per reserve site. The second opportunity is our Procurement, Acquisition, and Construction Awards. This funding is also based on annual congressional appropriations, but these funds are competitively awarded. And so of the 2 types of projects that can be awarded through this, there is a 50-50 match for land acquisition projects and a 70-30 match for facilities construction projects. All right, so we've talked about how the reserve system operates, and now I want to turn to the designation process and what that looks like. So the process to designate a federally designate a National Estuarine Research Reserve is outlined here on the slide. And along the way, it's going to involve many steps and many different individuals, all of which I hope are on the call, or that at least all of you will be involved in the process in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so step 1 is the letter of interest. The state will send a letter of interest to NOAA identifying its desire to develop a reserve program and nominating a site. NOAA received this letter of interest from Governor Edwards in July of 2019, and NOAA affirmed its support in November of 2019. So that brings us to step 2, which is the site selection and nomination process, and that's where we're at now. In this process, the state develops site criteria, as well as a process for selecting a site in consultation with NOAA and key partners, and getting public input on that preferred site. The governor will then submit to NOAA's administrator a site selection document that outlines the process that was used, the details of the selected site, along with a nomination letter. NOAA will review that site selection document and then send a letter back to the governor accepting or rejecting the nomination. Once the nomination's been accepted, NOAA, in collaboration with the state, will start the development of a draft environmental impact statement, and the state will start the development of a draft management plan for the reserve site. Throughout the draft environmental impact statement and draft management plan process, there are opportunities for the public to comment. And once the drafts are completed, there will then be a formal public comment process. Those comments will all then be taken into account, addressed, and a final environmental impact statement and management plan will be developed. In addition to that, a memorandum of understanding among the reserve partners, establishing their respective roles and responsibilities will be established, as well as an MOU that identifies the state and NOAA roles in managing the reserve. Once all that is completed, NOAA prepares designation findings and a record of decision, and the reserve is officially designated. And that is the part where we all then celebrate. So keep in mind, this will not happen overnight. The length of the process depends on the time it takes to accomplish all of these numerous steps that outlined here and that are outlined in the regulations regarding reserve designation. The site selection and nomination process involves a number of steps in public engagement. And once a site's nominated and approved, the EIS and management plan development begins. And so both of these steps require public engagement, and it takes significant time to develop documentation, engage experts and the public, and execute the review and approval processes. So robust stakeholder engagement is what we're really hoping for, because it's essential to ensure that the most appropriate site for all of the Louisiana stakeholders is designated, and it's imperative to a well-executed designation process. So while it's impossible to say right now how long the process is going to take, you are all an essential part of it. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a couple of key considerations for the designation of a Louisiana reserve. So first up, when looking at accepting the nomination of a new reserve site, NOAA gives priority consideration to designation proposals that establish a reserve in a biogeographic region or subregion that's not represented by in the reserve system already, or that incorporates a unique habitat type that is not represented in the system already. So the Mississippi Delta subregion, which is where Louisiana is located, is already represented in the LaNERR system. So any site nomination proposal for Louisiana would need to incorporate a unique habitat type. Dr. Twilley is going to speak to this in a little bit more detail during his presentation, but identifying this unique habitat will be a key part of the site selection process. The second consideration relates to the site selection process and how it considers the environmental changes happening along the Louisiana coast and the efforts to address them through the Coastal Master Plan. So NOAA recognizes that many of the areas that could potentially be designated as a reserve have undergone ecological change as a result of human activities, and that these changes may have diminished the historical character and integrity of a potential reserve site. Any new designation that goes forward is always going to have to grapple with these issues, and the Louisiana Reserve designation process is no different. Given that a reserve site is dedicated to long-term research, stewardship, and education, the site selection process is necessarily going to have to involve the weighing of those issues, along with the future plans that the state has to address these environmental changes. Dr. Twilley is going to talk in more detail later about the criteria. And the criteria that are applied to any potential site through a site selection process are designed to take those considerations into account. And I want to say that the Coastal Master Plan is going to be an essential resource for the committees as they navigate these discussions. And so that is the conclusion of my remarks. I'd like to just open it up for questions and say thank you so much. And we are really, really excited to kick off this process.
Okay, so do we have any questions? All right, if not, we could just move on to Dr. Twilley's presentation.
Great. So Kristen or Latasha, give me a thumbs up. You can hear me okay? Great. So with that introduction, I'm going to talk quite a bit and focus on the process here in Louisiana and some of the opportunities. And so let me start with a little bit make a few points in reference to the national program. One point I like to make is that many of you recognize these goals. Many of you work for institutions that have similar goals: stewardship, research, training, and education related to estuaries, as we do at Sea Grant. And what I want to emphasize is that what this opportunity represents is facilities at a site that I think all of us can enhance our own respective contributions to this goal or to these missions. And so that's why I'm excited about this, because I think that, we all know how remote our coast is and how hard it is to give student experiences down the coast and the public. And so I think this really provides those opportunities. And it is a site. It's very different than a program. And the two examples I've shown here are actually, it came up in conversation this afternoon. The upper picture on the right is Texas Aransas. That's the closest reserve to our west. The Grand Bay, which is the lower right picture from the Grand Bay, is our closest reserve to the east. And so we would be putting a reserve in between those two bookends. And the point I want to make, besides having facilities relative to the goals that many of us have, is this idea that we get to tell our story of our estuary and our delta at the national level. And I like to use the example of myself as Sea Grant Director, where when I meet with the Sea Grant Association in Washington, D.C., or wherever we might meet around the country when it's hosted by one of our local state programs, you get to sit at the table with 34 other programs around the nation representing coastal zones. And the exchange and being able to tell your narrative, I think being part of a national network is really important, because I think our Delta, I know many times that I've spoken in Washington, D.C. and across the country, how complicated it is to try to understand the deltaic issues of Louisiana when everyone thinks we're like Chesapeake Bay or the Everglades. And so telling that narrative and having a site that can collect information and talk about that at a national level is very important. I want to emphasize another point that Kristen made, and that is the process. We are at step 2. We have a lot of work to do after we get the site nominated. But the reason I'm showing this is I get this other question quite a bit, and that is, well, I've just heard about this. Have you already picked a site? Is it too late to get involved? And the answer is certainly no. This is our kickoff week. We are, starting in our serious deliberations on this process. And so please get involved, get engaged, and you're certainly at a point where you can influence the process. And here is a little bit more detail. I like to show this because, just again, we're in the stage of nominating a site, and then once to have that site designated requires a lot of work following the nomination process. Well, what was the strategy of the sites that I'm getting ready to show you and not sites, I'm sorry, these zones, these generalized boundaries. Well, one of the things you'll notice if you look across all the Estuarine Research Reserve, they have a couple of characteristics. One is combining public lands, federal and or state, with public waters, that not so much contiguous, but joining them in a general area that form an estuary that has unique characteristics, just like Kristen said. And what we're using is this concept of a delta estuary. And again, we argue that even though 2 other sites might be in the Mississippi biogeographic zone, we will be the only delta in the 29 delta in the estuarine system. But that's our approach: public lands, public waters, and do they form delta estuary characteristics? Using that approach, we came up with 6 zones. And I keep using the word zones because when I do show you a line on the map, I want you to realize these are not specific boundaries. These are generalized areas to compass and wrap around public lands and public waters that form an estuary. And to the left or to the west is Calcasieu Estuarine Zone, in the central Atchafalaya Estuarine Zone, and to the east you have Terrebonne, Barataria, Pontchartrain, and the Mississippi River Estuarine Zone. And this is our starting point. And to define specific candidate sites within those zones, we have we built this structure, a site designation coordination team that keeps the train running on time, basically. The site development committee, which is doing the work to do the technical review, to look at the qualities and assets in these sites and compare them to the criteria guidance that NOAA has established. Because I want to make this point, emphasize another point. What we do is take our existing laws, our existing regulations, our existing programs and management strategies for landscapes and submit them in the context of a management plan and to NOAA to ask them to designate this area as an estuarine research reserve because it meets the NOAA criteria. And so following those criteria is very important. And then the decision on what site, candidate sites, are actually submitted to the governor, which is then submitted to NOAA for consideration as our nominated site, is done by the site evaluation committee. So we built this firewall between those who are constructing candidate sites and proposals and the group that will actually make final decisions. Here's a site designation coordination team, myself, Morgan Crutcher from the governor's office, Latasha Mullins from Louisiana Sea Grant, and Kristen, you just heard speaking on behalf of NOAA and serves as our project liaison member. Site development committee, I noticed a lot of names on the list tonight. This is a technical group made up of members of state agencies, federal agencies, NGOs, and universities who are looking through the criteria and comparing that to the zones that we're proposing. We had an orientation meeting in early October, our first pre-screening breakout groups in mid-October. We are now just finishing the maps as requested by the site development committee to go back and deliberate, now that we have more information and proceed with some of our pre-screening process. And then we have an executive committee that we keep up to date and meet with to show our progress and discuss any concerns through the program. So let me go back real quick. We start with 6 generalized zones. We pre-screen those to see if we pursue sites at all 6 zones or at 3 zones, or exactly which of these zones really meet the NOAA criteria. And every step of the process is to screen out ideas and start to become more granular in exactly what becomes a candidate site. And then once we have those sites, we meet with the public and then formulate final plans that are then evaluated as to which will be submitted to the governor. And so there is this technical analysis of how well and what are the merits of certain landscapes related to criteria, but there's also the public engagement, public support, and partnerships. Both, and I did get a question earlier, which is more important, and without the public support, none of these sites will be really seriously considered. So what are these criteria? We've mentioned this several times. Well, the source of the criteria is this document published in February 2020 by NOAA, the National Estuarine Research Reserve Designation Guidance. They have 4 areas, and each of these 4 areas, they have various specific criteria. We are allowed to modify those criteria to fit the specific and unique characteristics of our landscape, a delta. And those 4 areas: environmental representativeness, the value of the site for research and monitoring and resource protection, the suitability of the site for education and interpretation, and then the ability of the site to actually acquire new space and land and expand, and then how well the site discusses management issues. So let me go through these four and show you some generalized maps and then wrap up with some specifics about our steps forward. Under acquisition and management, again, we look for public lands and public waters, sufficient land and water area to maintain the integrity of a delta ecosystem. And so one of the key issues is looking at 50-year horizons at these landscapes. And then also how suitable is the site to address key coastal management issues. Again, this gets to education and interpretation as well. So here are our 6 zones with the sort of outline of these generalized boundaries. In the upper left is a Calcasieu going from west to east, is a Calcasieu estuarine zone. And the central upper panel is the Atchafalaya estuarine zone. And the upper right panel is the Terrebonne estuarine zone. Lower left is the Barataria estuarine zone. In the lower central, the Pontchartrain estuarine zone. And in the lower right, the Mississippi. Give you a little clearer or somewhat clearer view of these. And again, this presentation will be loaded up on our website. And so you can have some more time to look at these. But you'll see, outlines of, you'll see in yellow here, the federal lands, where they're located. The purple are some conservation easements. And then in blue, the state water bottoms or state waters. Again, locating those, circling them around this generalized boundary to be our first draft of where an estuarine site might exist. Again, here's Atchafalaya. Here we actually have state parks, that 2 of which Sycamore and Lake Fosse. We have wildlife management areas. We actually, in this one, there's an Audubon Rainy Reserve. There's federal lands in the upper zone and state lands. And again, you can see how we sort of generalize a boundary around these to think about an estuarine zone. The Terrebonne, this is when it's interesting. Here, a lot of our lines actually follow the levee systems. You have the Pointe-aux-Chenes Wildlife Management Area with all the recreational value that it has, and actually new additions to that with some CPRA projects. And you have the Barrier Island system in state water bottoms as well. The Barataria, there's a lot of diversity here. Federal lands, federal park, state park, Wisner Foundation lands. So you can see how in these maps, the reason you see the demarcations that you do is because this is demonstrating how we've are identifying public lands and public waters and to build an estuarine zone. Pontchartrain has a lot of diversity, as you see here, including the Pearl River. We added this as well. And again, I want to emphasize these are generalized boundaries of which our strategy is to, does this make the first cut in our pre-screening? And if it does, then let's get more granular and go down into specifics as to where the boundaries of a site might actually exist. But you see federal lands, again, state parks, wildlife management areas, et cetera, that become part of the potential near. And at the mouth of the Mississippi, you have both federal and state lands. And if you want to talk about an active delta, this is about as active as you can get with the dynamics in this location. Now, environmental representativeness, this is looking at an active delta estuary and how well the processes, ecological features of the delta, the life cycle of estuarine dependent species, the vegetation types, the salinity gradient, and are there any unique and endangered species? So this is all about the ecology of the site, and we have maps to demonstrate various ecological attributes and environmental characteristics. And the idea, again, is to not rank these zones, but in each one gets as we're asked the question, does it have the merits of these guidelines to actually constitute further consideration? And so that's the real key process we're doing, and we're generating maps to emphasize those characteristics. The value of the site for research and monitoring. Again, this one is looking at monitoring stations. What's the diversity of ecological features to capture deltaic ecological delta response? And then looking at the site for how well research institutions and facilities may use these sites for future research projects. This one, you see the yellow dots. Those are the CRIM sites, the Coastwide Reference Monitoring System. I think this is one of the, no matter where you are on our coast, all 6 of these zones, you know, we have CRIM sites. We have a fantastic statewide monitoring system. And so, but in addition, we have other water quality monitoring and other assets. So we have maps to show how each of these zones provide that potential as as far as value to this criteria. Third one is a site for education and interpretation. What we did here was looking at, you know, are there unique ecological features, scenic and historic rivers, archaeological sites, Indian mounds, so it's not just environmental, but it's also cultural. Are there schools and education and interpretation centers near? What is the access? What's the proximity of these sites to people and to students and to our universities? And that's the key question. And so, our key criteria. And what's the transportation access, boat launches, so that people can, I mean, why have an Estuarine Research Reserve if you can't get students out to it? And so, and have some training characteristics. So what we did was we took these zones and started looking at how close they are to different urban areas, how close are they, what is their proximity to schools, the number of kids, that, you know, to universities, to interpretive centers that already exist at federal parks or at state parks, or, you know, and so this is all related to, and in fact, this map has the same scale of 1 to 800,000. So you can actually see what is the proximity of people relative to their ability to have access or be able to use these estuarine zones for these education interpretation characteristics. So what's the next step? So what we are emphasizing this week is our kickoff week is, you know, we're at the stage, we're going back to the Site Development Committee really soon with the updated maps and information that we need to get to this next stage of consideration of which zones we're going to further investigate and look at and analyze for a site. The public roadshow, this is a big push this week for getting people to sign up, and I really want to emphasize this. I will on our website here in a second. We don't want to take final sites and then go to the public and say, what do you think? We want the public to get engaged in this right now and tell us what they think. And so we're setting up an opportunity for organizations to invite us to give presentations and answer some survey questions. And then we'll give that back to the Site Development Committee. So when they start thinking about what they're doing and deliberating, they're not just basing it on technical issues of ecological habitat, but they're looking at other features. They're looking at what feedback the public what we recorded from the public. And then once we get down to some specific sites, then you go out to those communities in sort of a town hall format, present the site, and really get down to the public engagement and what the public brings to the table, and a lot of partnership opportunities. And so that's the reason for the town halls. So we're sort of parallel a couple of things, and that is our pre-screening process and our roadshow. We hope the first of the year we start really articulating exactly what locations and sites are becoming evident that they really have you know, more merit than others to pursue. And then once we have that established, go out to these town hall meetings and then a final selection. So let me wrap up. How do I stay engaged? We have a website. I think I have a better, yep, www.lacgrant.org is our Sea Grant website. And you'll notice right to the left, if I can get my little pointer, right to the left of the Sea Grant, this is, you click on LaNERR and you'll go to this LaNERR website. This has been updated, and in that update, we've added this virtual roadshow button. You click on that button, fill out a form, your name, contact, your organization, when your next meeting is, and we'll try to line up a virtual presentation to your organization. You can also go to, let's see, what's the best? I think it's right here. Let me go through these buttons real quick. This came up in our first presentation. You can click on this to get the roadshow. If you want to get in, please click on Get Involved. And on Get Involved, you'll see our how to sign up on Twitter, sign up on our Facebook. It has a listserv. Fill in your name and your email to be a member of our listserv. If you want to see the presentation that we've given in the past, they are under fact sheets and videos. They're ADA compliant. And this presentation today will be on that website once we go through the compliance process. And these other opportunities is if the first two buttons, if I can get my mouse to work here, this takes you to the LaNERR website to show you, and so you can learn more about the LaNERR program nationally. This is very important. I highly recommend this because you can click on this map and go look at different sites. I think it's really important to be familiar with all the different opportunities. They're all different. There's all different strategies of setting up a LaNERR. And so this is use this site. I mean, I want to compliment our communications department that has worked to put this together. And in the last couple of days, now that we have some focus on materials and process, it really helped to connect this so that the public can be more engaged and get information. And so we look forward to you participating on that. And with that, I'm going to stop.
Great. So I haven't seen any questions in the chat. Do we have some wallflowers up there holding on to a question that they secretly want to ask? It's easier to put it in chat. You can put it in chat. You can message me privately. You can raise your hand electronically through the contacts. You can be bold and unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Yeah. Oh, and
Okay.
Kristen is still online, and I think there may be some other NOAA folks still online as well, and they can jump in and answer questions.
Yeah, I have a question for Kristen. I'm with CPRA, and you mentioned the master plan and how various areas might be affected by activities. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the pros or cons of how the master plan projects, coastal restoration projects and coast protection projects play into your considerations.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And it's a really, really good one, and one we have been grappling with a lot, given the size and scope of the master plan. I think it's something that is really unique to Louisiana. I think we all know this. So as I mentioned before, we recognize that it's going to be hard to site a reserve in a fully pristine area these days. Our coasts are dynamic and changing, and so I think what we'll say is that our regulations do permit the restoration of areas in a reserve site, but these activities must be carefully planned and approved by the state and NOAA through the reserve management planning process. And having the coastal master plan in hand as part of those conversations is going to be crucial when we're talking about that piece. And so I think it's to the benefit of this process that the master plan exists, and that's such a great opportunity for long range thinking and planning around restoration needs in the state has already been done, because it makes that process down the road a whole lot easier. What I will say is that reserves are, the purpose of a reserve is to be a site for long-term research, stewardship, education. And so what we want to avoid is activities occurring on a reserve site that so significantly change the integrity of the site that it's no longer representative of what it was when it was designated. And so those are sort of the considerations that folks are going to have to be weighing as we go into the site selection process. I hope that answers your question. If there's some more detail that you'd like, just let me know and I'll go into more.
Yes, that answered that question. I did have one more kind of a follow-up as related to when you say long-term and looking at, because of our coastal land loss situation, and we are already kind of looking at how that just long-term viability, will the site still be there in its physical form? So I was wondering, as far as long-term habitat migration or changes, you mentioned changes in the site, but that's something that is going to be inevitable. I think Robert brought up this as well, that we're such a greatly dynamic situation here in coastal Louisiana.
Yes, and again, that's going to be part of that site selection process. What I will say is that we asked the site development committee members to think forward 50 years. But really what we're thinking about with the reserve is essentially it lasting in perpetuity, right? And understanding that coastlines are dynamic and that there will be some of that change. But I think that type of change is different from manipulative activities that go in and actively change the integrity of the site through human activities. And so those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to take a look at.
Great question.
Thank you.
Thanks. So this next question, it comes from Corey Miller, and I think Elia might have a follow-up to this. But basically the question is that, Kristen, in one of your slides, you mentioned that the unique characteristic of the Mississippi River Delta biogeographic region was already accounted for in another NERR. You would like to understand this better, and what are some of the other unique attributes that Louisiana may offer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I owe maybe a little bit of clarification on that Mississippi River Delta piece. That's the name of the biogeographic region that this location would be set in. That's the sub-region that the Louisiana Reserve sits in. I won't say that, we have a couple of different reserve types that have very similar, that have deltas in them, but maybe not quite as active as the Louisiana Mississippi River Delta might be. So again, I think Robert focused on that piece in his presentation. I think the best I can do right now is give you some of the examples of some of the unique habitat types that have occurred at other reserves that have been designated. If you take a look over at Weeks Bay, Alabama, that is also a delta estuary, but it does have pitcher plant bogs and some other very specific habitat types that are unique to the system. If you go over to Grand Bay Reserve, we have these pine savanna forests that are huge, and it is also a delta area, but it's an enclosed bay. And so those are the types of unique habitat types that we're looking at. And I think one other piece that I would like to mention is that when we say unique, it does not mean that it has to be like never before seen, but that it is not hold on, I want to be very clear about this. So I'm going to go look for the actual language. And Erica, if you have it off the top of your head, maybe you can put it in the chat. But limited representation in the reserve system, I believe, is what the language is from our designation document. So I hope that answers your question.
I would make sure that answers whatever was Amelia's question. Does that satisfy what you were thinking?
Well, I'd like to make a couple of comments, and one of them is I would love to see all of these snake together to form our estuarine. I would imagine it's a slim chance that we'd be able to save everything that Robert showed us today. But we know, we're preaching to the choir here. We know how unique coastal Louisiana is when you put it side by side with all the other wetland areas. I mean, we're a working coast. vital to the well-being of the economy of the nation, just ad infinitum, beyond just being interesting wetlands. But the other comment I wanted to make was about the 50-year horizon, because I took my first wetland ecology course in 55 years ago. And to consider the changes that I've seen in my professional lifetime is daunting. And I can only imagine what it's going to be in the next 50 years. So that's going to be a real challenge for us, just to be able to envision the changes that are here. 55 years ago, we would not have envisioned where we are today. And I was lucky. My professors were Johnny Lynch and Jake Valentine. I mean, two of the great old guys that had worked in these marshes 50 years themselves at that time. But I do think we're on the brink of something really wonderful here. And I'm really hoping we can save as much as we can, understanding that any place we choose is going to lose a lot of land between now and the next 50 years.
I have a comment. Being the mayor of a town in the Chapala Delta, I'm so excited to see that they were included in those 6 areas that may be considered, and we're just going to work extra hard here to try to show our wares here and what's in the Delta, and but just I want to say thank you for having us in there.
Yeah. You know, one story I told Mayor, I told at the last meeting, someone asked, well, how important is it for the public voice in this? Is it just a technical decision? And I loved telling the story, because I think it's just I think it says so much about the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. And that is that there were two candidates, 2 final candidates, and I think they were up on the Great Lakes somewhere, and two final candidates and sites being considered. And the favorite site, actually, they had a town hall meeting, and the other site that was sort of ranked number 2, the mayor of where that site was being considered gave such a passionate speech about why that was so important to their community that it actually turned out to be influential on the final site that they selected. So it's a great story. I hope it inspires you, and it's our commitment to make sure that the excitement of the communities is a really important part. And I don't know if Kristen, if I went overboard on that, but if someone from NOAA will speak and back me up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a reserve site just is not successful if there's not community support behind it. And so, that's going to be essential to any site that is designated.
Well, I can tell you we're excited down here in the Chapala Delta, and we plan on getting more excited. And just thank you again.
Thank you for being here. Really quickly, I wanted to say I had a couple of follow-ups. I put them in the chat, but unique habitat, I found that the piece that I was looking for from our site designation guidance, and it's defined as a habitat type of limited known occurrence in the biogeographic region or subregion. So just want to be very, very clear about that piece. And then there was a comment about from Ilya about his question being answered, but assuming that NOAA and partners would provide guidance if that's not competitive. And just to say, yes, we are engaged with the team throughout the entire process, and we'll definitely, be part of those conversations. So.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kristen. I want to make sure that we go back. This was kind of addressed, but I want to go ahead and ask it again just to make sure that we cover it. So from Kelly Boudreau, regarding the site selection process, the question is, how are you judging if one community is more on board than another? And so the question here is really, how are communities engaged in this process, and how is their feedback and support for this accommodated within the selection process?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good question. And so, you know, the details aren't, we haven't really worked the details out until we get to that point. But again, I'll just reemphasize too, again, it's not a linear sequence of, all right, we do all the technical work and then we go to the public. What we're trying to do, and that's why these road shows are so important, is that we're trying to parallel, as we get, you know, information on the zones and the sites that we're considering, that we have these roadshow presentations and give the public a chance to register their interest. And so that's parallel. That's happening at the same time that the Site Development Committee is meeting and developing their analysis of the merits of different zones. Then, and we want that response from those site roadshows we want to show that to the Site Development Committee so they can see what kind of excitement is occurring as they think through the potential sites. So, and then though, just to make sure, I mean, the second phase of that is once we have what we call candidate sites that have more specific boundaries around what would be the vision of an estuarine, National Estuarine Research Reserve, we have what we call town hall meetings at the communities that will be around those boundaries. And those town hall meetings would be, okay, here is a candidate site. And here is your community. You're around this candidate site. And see what kind of engagement and excitement and new partnerships. Look, can you imagine once you start seeing these boundaries and communities start seeing them, who knows what groups in your community may all of a sudden get excited and start speaking up. So I think that excitement from those town hall meetings, however we measure that, I'm not sure. I don't know the details yet of that. But that's about the clarity I have right now, and I'm sure we'll have more clarity as we think through this. I hope that helps, because it's a really important question.
Great, we have another question from Elia, and it is, what is the lead time and the logistics involved for an institution interested in a roadshow? So having one of these presentations come to their stakeholder group.
Lead time for
So how long in advance do they need to make the request?
Oh, for a presentation for the roadshow. Well, they're all virtual. We you know, we don't need much lead time. We're going to have multiple. We're hoping we're going to have multiple volunteers who can give the presentation. So whenever you have a meeting, if you go to the form, and it's active now, if you want to go to our website and type in, maybe you can be the first. But what you will notice is that we're trying to get as many roadshows as we can before February 15th. And the reason we put that date in there is that we want these as soon as we can, because then that gets more information back to the Site Development Committee as they're doing their work. And so sign up. We got a group ready to help schedule right now. I like to get a little sleep tonight, but that's all right.
No sleep for you, Robert. Unfortunately, he doesn't know that I'm a slave driver. So we have a comment from Bob Thomas that I just want to highlight for everyone. So from Bob Thomas, I assume the unique habitat we bring to the table is our vast intermediate marshes and their marginal ecotones with adjacent wetland categories.
Yeah, I think, there's, floatants are actually pretty unique too, Bob. I think that and our coastal forests, I think Honora might agree with me on that. I think, our tidal freshwater wetlands, look, the reason that zone goes in the Atchafalaya. The reason it goes all the way up to I-10 is that's officially the tidal freshwater extent.
Yeah.
A lot of people may not realize that.
Right.
And so, you know, I think the gradients that we have, I think are just spectacular. We've got so many. So anyway, I think there are a lot that we bring to the table.
Yeah, Robert, I totally
And,
agree
and
with
you know,
you.
the other thing, Bob, one other, the Christian's point, and I know
Yeah.
people like Weeks Bay and they like to use deltas, and for sure, Mobile Bay, beautiful paper just published on the delta up in Mobile Bay. But what's different is those are all transgressive geologies. We are the only, you know, those are, you know, I mean, we have the prograding landscape, and it's a very different system. It's not drowned river valleys with deltas sitting up in the upper part of the estuaries. So there's nothing like it anywhere else in any coast except for,
Right.
you know.
No, we all agree with that.
In Canada,
But it's the diversity that makes us unique. It really is our diversity, right? Which covers everything that makes us unique.
Yeah, you can't find anything better. So.
Right. We know that. Now we have to tell the world. We've been doing that for a long time. This is exciting.
Well, I'm going to be signing off, but look for a town hall meeting from St. Mary Parish.
What, and we'll have someone sign up from your, you know, get on a road show. Let's get, I mean, anybody who's from different zones. I'm going to try to get our extension service to try to get as many of these signed up in our different zones as we can.
Well, thank y'all for doing this, putting this program on this afternoon.
Thanks, Mayor.
Dr. Bob's right, this is a quiet group. We have question after question in the last group.
Yeah, went overtime.
We have another question from Ilya.
So the question is, I have to get it, and this is with regard to the roadshow presentation, and it's just a comment. Okay, I think we can take that offline. I think that's autocorrect. That was underrepresented. Is that what that was? Yes. Includes underrepresented minorities. It would allow diverse stakeholders access org info.
Yeah,
Got it.
that's a good point.
I mentioned this in the chat, but it's just another point of contention. I think that Louisiana NERR, no matter where we put it, will probably be, if not the biggest, one of the biggest NERRs in the system.
Yeah, we you know, we did a quick analysis of the longitudinal axis of the Pontchartrain and Atchafalaya are both about 180 kilometers. When we added up the area of just the public lands and waters, we were somewhere around 1.2 million acres. The largest estuarine research reserve right now is up in Alaska, and it's 375,000 acres. And so, Kristen, how you like those numbers? And so, you know, the challenge is everyone gets the same amount of money, whether you're 500 acres or 1.2 million, to run your program. So I think that's going to be, you know, something for us to think about.
All right, so Sarah K has asked that we review the estimated timeline to complete the process again.
Well, I guess the timeline is, there's a couple of key points that I'll just highlight, and maybe Kristen can follow up on this. The one key timeline is to have a site that the governor of Louisiana will submit to NOAA, what is called the nominated site. So that NOAA can then give us a green light on that site to move forward with an environmental impact statement and a management plan. And so we have to get to the point of where is our site and get that up to NOAA. Is that a year? I mean, right now our idea is to have that by summer of 21. It's extremely aggressive to make sure we have all the public participation in the process. And then I don't know how long it takes for NOAA to come back with a decision, but then once that decision is made, the EIS and et cetera, you know, some of it is resource. I mean, how much resources can you apply to getting things done? And you know, is that 2 years, or I don't know. I think a number today Kristen used was a year and a half to 2 years once your site is determined to go through the EIS and all the legal aspects of having a site designated. I don't know if that helps or not, but Kristen, am I off on any of those comments?
No, just say that 1.5 and 2 years is definitely after the whole process to nominate the site has happened. I think the quickest reserve that we've seen designated has been in 4 years, averages between 4 and 6 to 7. Just sort of depends on how the process goes. I will say, I think that one thing that we have found in this process is that a robust stakeholder engagement process at the beginning of the process has definitely helped on the later end with addressing any issues early, rather than having them come up later on in the process and sort of putting some roadblocks in the way. So that robust stakeholder engagement process at the upfront, what we're working on now, is critical to a successful process.
And so then we have a question from Ilya concerning the site development committee. When will refined maps be disseminated to the appropriate committee if it hasn't already been done?
I had our webmaster fixing us the site for you, Ilya, today. We finished them this weekend. I had a meeting Tuesday. We did our final edits on all the maps that were requested from the first meeting, and we're ready to send them out to you. So if not, it may not be Friday, but I hope it is. I'll just say Monday morning, you'll get notification that you have the maps up and with all the descriptions, and so you can start looking at what you asked for from the first set of meetings.
So Robert, I'd like to ask you, I'm going to throw a question in there since we're slowing down a little bit. So currently we do not have a managing entity identified for the LaNERR. This is not abnormal. Many search processes go through this and identify the managing entity during the site search. How are we approaching that, and what's the plan?
Yeah, and again, Kristen can help me on this, but from what I did a review of just about all the management plans for the 29 LaNERR sites, and they're all very different. Their governance. In fact, I have a collection and a copy of the governance structure and organizational chart of all 29 of the LaNERR sites compiled. When the site is selected, there's two things that you have to develop once NOAA has accepted a site. One is the EIS, and second is a management plan. And in that management plan, you have to establish the governance of your site. And that's when the entity and how it's managed and how it's governed. And in many cases, the agency or the group that gets you through the pre-designation process is not the group that actually ends up in the governance structure of the management plan. Because that governance structure of that management plan is so dependent on where is your site. And so, Kristen, that would be that's what when I read through all those plans, I came away very strongly with that. And I'm telling you, a lot of those governance structures, they're very diverse. State agency, university, NGOs. I mean, there's a combination of how these different sites are run by different governance structures.
Yeah, Robert, that's what I would say. And I think that I'll add that because we rely on the existing state rules for the state control of the reserve site, it really is dependent on where the site is located. And since we're so early in the process, it's really difficult to say, with any certainty who might be best to fill that role. But hopefully through the designation and nomination process, it'll come a bit more clear.
Good question, though. We didn't get that in the first round.
One other thing I would like to mention really quickly, just to be very, very clear about the managing entity, is that they can only be state agencies or state universities. No NGOs are able to be a managing state entity. So just want to be clear about that.
That's good, and I think where you, both with universities and like other Sea Grant programs, where in other states they have been somewhat connected to National Estuarine Research Reserves, is usually by a dotted line. Whatever that dotted line means, or sitting in an advisory council. They may be an advisory council that et cetera. So.
All right, we are at 5 minutes. This is your last chance, folks. We have 5 minutes to get those questions out on the table. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait to submit them to our email address or request your own stakeholder roadshow to get them answered.
I'll throw one more out there for Kristen, I guess, since nobody else has. But I've noticed in looking around at all the different NERRs that pretty much all of them have some sort of local support group, like a friends of group, and they play a very big role in many of the NERRs. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I would love to speak to that because I love our friends groups. It's so great. So there are a lot of reserves that do have friends groups, and these are organizations that are there to support the reserve system or to support the reserve site. They are very different in organization and really are sort of organized around the specific needs of the reserve that they're supporting. But they are key for getting a ton of volunteers into the reserves and helping drum up support both locally and also at state level legislative areas. They do all kinds of things. These are, they are jacks of all trades when it comes to supporting the reserves. We've also seen some that are organized into foundations. The Weeks Bay Foundation is a great example where they've been able to actually help source external funding and serve as a manager for external grant funding. So there's a lot of really fantastic ways that friends groups can support. The other thing that I will mention is the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association, which is sort of the national umbrella friends group for the reserves. And they are, I mean, the things that they do, you can't even list them. They're so long, but they do serve as sort of a national organizing group for these local friends groups. And they are, our advocacy arm on the Hill and are really key. And, I mentioned those appropriation dollars. They've been key in keeping those appropriations level and growing when they grow. So can't say enough about friends groups. And those things tend to develop, once the reserve is designated and those sort of needs arise and you sort of understand where that support can be most useful. But they are definitely a huge asset to any reserve.
Excellent. Enthusiasm noted. Okay, so we're 6:58. I'm going to take one more question, and I think we can adjourn the call. This last question is, will both this call and the earlier one be available to listen to again? So not just the presentations, but the
Is that right,
actual
Latasha?
recording.
I know, Latasha, both recordings, or is it the second one, or what's the status?
Yeah, both meetings were recorded. This one got nipped just a
We
bit at the
missed the very
beginning,
beginning of the second one.
but they're both recorded.
And so what we will do is, it takes a little while, but our communications department at Sea Grant will take the recording and go through the ADA compliant techniques, and it'll have a script that you can read, as well as the watch and listen. And so they will process that. That may take a week, and then they'll be posted under facts and videos. It's one of the buttons that's on the website. And if you click on that, in fact, there are a couple already up there. I mean, if you want to see much of what I presented, you can already go online, click on that button, and a couple of my presentations are already up there. So we're getting them posted as we roll them out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for committing some of your evening time with us, and thank you again to our presenters, Mr. Ransom and Dr. Robert Philly, for providing us more information on this effort. And with that, please join Facebook, follow us on Twitter, visit our website, sign up for a brochure presentation, and we look forward to engaging with you further, especially in the new year.
Take care. Thanks.